No, you don't.
All righty, we're recording. Okay. So, do you want to start with the manual or like the slides?
I think the manual, that way we get an overview
Okay.
of each day.
All right. So just to go over like objectives for I'll do day 2 and maybe you can do day 3. So the main objectives of day 2 are to deepen individual self-awareness of fellows' identity and roles, to increase confidence in leadership and cultural strengths, to increase understanding of educational landscape in Alamance County, and to explore a systemic level change lens to better understand educational outcomes in their context. So these are outcomes or objectives connected to each of these sessions that you will see.
The main sessions. for
Yeah.
everything.
So let's just go over day 2. So we get there at 8, we set up. We're gonna have breakfast. For the welcome, Brian is gonna lead that. We're gonna have El Círculo, kind of have you've seen us model it.
Mhm.
We're gonna do this activity. I'm just gonna go briefly because then we'll go into the slides. We have an activity called Who Are You? Then La Cultura Cura workshop. Then we have lunch. Then we have another session, systems change. Then we have a break. Then we're gonna play musical chairs. And we put y'all there as like, you know, something kind of easy breezy that you can just like lead. And then
Like, is it easy?
it's gotten wild before.
People get crazy.
And then we have a session about education in Alamance. Then we have a closing. At the end of every day, we have a survey. And then, yeah, and at 5 and cleanup. So,
Can we just
yeah.
briefly look at roles? Definitely like if there are opportunities you see that you're like interested in, please highlight them. You know, this is your first week, so you mainly see that, you know, part of your role will be like capturing impact, you more through like visuals, content, and then you kind of thinking of that curriculum piece. But if there are other areas outside of where you already see yourself, then please let us know, because we're definitely open. We just want to give you a chance to, you know, onboard, get acquainted with everything, but we're open if you're ready. And so you notice that I have them supporting some of the like setup things for lunch, breakfast, and things like that. And then we'll get to this later, but I've been bringing in our values for a couple things. And so we'll share kind of the vision for how can we ground our learnings with the values at the end of each day.
Yes. So let's look at the slides for first day.
Yay.
Also, y'all's headshots were everything to me.
Let's see.
Ooh, someone remade that one. I love it.
Yeah, I did. I was like, I need to see it bigger.
Like bigger, yes.
So, day 1 already happened, right? So they're experiencing day 2, day 3. So we're kind of giving them like, this is like in a few words, like what this day is about. So day 2, Friday, will be about reframing. And then day 3 is about practice and freedom dreaming. So at the beginning of each day, we do a little overview of like what the day's looking like. So we talked about that. We have a reminder of like,
I have questions about that, but it's there if I'm not sure when they're actually gonna be.
They will be posted after June 17th. That's still the timeline. I'll drop it.
Okay. So we encourage them to take footage, blah, 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 but they can't post until June 17th because that's when they're being announced on social media. The first day that already happened, they built these community norms. These are theirs. So an opportunity to revisit them, maybe ask, you know, like, what are a few that you want to highlight and bring into the space? So we talked about carga de regalo. And you'll see at the bottom, like your face is there if you're leading something. Because like, it's easy to remember.
I'm a big advocate of this.
No,
I will talk.
I like it.
Slide, even if I don't know what it's about.
We'll do the whole thing.
So we ground it with offerings and then we have like specific retreat offerings.
Those can definitely be updated, and maybe at the end, like, we can revisit, like, overview and offerings for the days, just to, like, edit them based on
Yeah.
what's coming for us.
Love that. Then we have the Who Are You activity. So do you want to talk about that one?
Yes. I wanna talk through this one with you,
Mhm.
cause it looks a little different than what I remember too. But basically this activity, and I'm actually, for myself, I'll walk through it. I started making like section with all of our community buildings, cause we don't actually have that. It's an activity in pairs. Where basically you ask each other the question like, who are you? And like you just respond. Each person has 2 minutes and your partner just asks you again and again, and you respond. And your partner, the person asking the question, writes down the things that like you're mentioning. And so at the end, both people will have a list of the things that they mention. You know, who are you? A mother, una hija, like whatever comes up to them. And then they kind of just like reflect on that. And we have a discussion on after that, those are the questions. Can you go to 10?
Yeah.
Like what surprised you or challenged you the most? What words, oh, I didn't update this, but I have some other questions. What words bring you joy? Or pride? What words cause you the most stress or anxiety?
I like that.
What did you learn about yourself or your partner during this activity? We didn't do this last year, so I don't know how it went last year, but I have seen the activity done before in our first 2 years. And it's felt like really powerful. And basically this starts the conversation of just discussing what are the differences between identity and roles. Because a lot of the time we carry roles as our identities,
Mhm.
even though some of those roles, like it defines here, like roles are things that like can change about you. And identities are things that you can't really change about yourself. So how do we ground ourselves a little bit on that and looking at our list and then just seeing like how many of my roles are identities, how many of my items are roles. And then like we talked about before, like even did any of your identities or roles bring you joy or stress and like what's causing that? So it's a bit of reflection. I'm not sure where it went with the other sites that I found from last year. So Kiera facilitated this last year. I left them up there to talk a little bit more about it. But at the end, we have kind of like offerings or like a food for thought on roles. Are we allowing ourselves or others to evolve in their roles? Are we allowing ourselves or others to make mistakes? How are we allowing ourselves to fail? Are we finding strength in what we cannot change about ourselves or others? Will our racial gender identity hold us back or propel us forward? I think we have allotted 45 minutes for this actually. Can't recall how much time we put last year. But it's just kind of like a little exploratory moment at the beginning of the day. And I'm excited about it.
Lovely.
Can we jump in with feedback? Is it time for feedback?
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay, I just have one thought on this session. Because the 3L slide deck, the fundamental or like the purpose for exploring the role and identity kind of pieces is to essentially explore how do we bring our Latinidad into our role as learners and into our role as leaders. So really thinking about merging those two, to your point, right, of our identities, like there is something about our personal identity that can also inform our role identities as learners and leaders. I think a lot of the times we've been conditioned to separate those or to maybe shy away from bringing our full authentic identity and identity into these spaces. But that's what we're trying to explore in the fellowship, right? Like, what does it mean to show up fully as our in our Latinidad and these roles? So I think then that gets you into that food for thought section. So I would definitely encourage us to make sure that we ground in the 3Ls. I think that connects to the why we even talk about
Okay.
the 3Ls as a part of our pillars.
Yes. I put a note there, discuss.
Yeah, we can map that out a little bit. I just didn't want us to lose sight of
No,
that piece because. it
Thanks
was
for
so
naming
good.
that.
How to
I
make
was
the
like,
connection.
I didn't remember it all.
Yeah.
I just remember the actual like reflection
Mm-hmm.
and writing down the activity, writing down the different
Mhm.
things list.
I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited for the session.
Awesome.
This is also such a great opening session because it really gets you to think again about how you're
Who am I?
bringing,
So,
literally who you are and how you're grappling with these. I'm excited for that.
this leads us to La Cultura Cura. Have y'all heard of the community cultural wealth model? Yeah, I'm excited.
Oh my God, we need to
So,
share.
that activity is grounding us for like all day, but it really is a great connection from that to La Cultura Cura, which basically talks about how society or others have viewed and created like scenarios about our community. And how oftentimes, this just kind of like sets the stage of like, how often do people perceive us from an asset-based lens? And instead of leading the conversation with the best parts of our community or what we bring to the table, they kind of focus on what is missing. So we talk about asset-based thinking versus deficit-based thinking. This is one of the big things about the retreats is we're trying to set the foundation for our workshops that come later. So we really want them to understand the ways that we approach our work and the ways that we are hoping and advocating for others to approach the work when it comes to communities of color, but in this case specifically the Latino community. And so the ways that these lenses have shaped how we see ourselves and how we see others is really important. So the community cultural wealth model is based on this asset-based thinking. It was something created by Tara Yoso, and it talks about all the different wealth that we bring to the table. And cultural wealth is she identified it with 6 capitals. Aspirational, familial, social, linguistic, navigational, resistance. We are adding a 7th one based on new research from Dr. Rosa Jimenez, who is adding the capital of migration and how that also informs our cultural context and understanding of who we are and the experiences we live. And so there's a quote on that from Tara Yoso, but on the page 21, you kind of see a brief summary of each of them. Some of these are pretty like self-explanatory by the name, but what they will get to do, can you open the slides for the stations? What they will get to do is dive a little deeper into each of those capitals to really reflect and gain understanding of what the capital is and how they connect to that capital or how they have seen it play out in their experience or the experience of others. And so there's gonna be 4 stations. There's gonna be 2 per station, 2 capitals per station with 1 question to reflect on. And so I went ahead and put a number on each so that the stations are there. And you can see that, like, let's read just the reflection questions. Go to 1. What are your dreams and aspirations, and how has your family environment shaped them? How has your community and network helped you navigate systems and barriers, or how have you helped your community navigate systems and barriers? This is for social and navigational. Linguistic and resistance. What are your linguistic roots? How can language be a strength tool for serving your community and resisting barriers? And then the last one, I actually want to review that one with you, the description. But the question is, what is your or your family's immigration story? How has this shaped your goals and aspirations? So they'll rotate, it'll be 10 minutes per station, and they'll get a chance to just learn from each other as well. And at the end, we will have some time to come back and reflect on what they learned. So one of the main questions we're asking is, which capital impacted you the most and why? And impact should be, it brought you a lot of joy, it made you curious, it caused pause, whatever that impact might have felt for you, what was it and why? And then the last one is, how can we use the community cultural wealth framework to write and share counter narratives in our work/community? They had some pre-work where they read dominant narratives and counter narratives and what they were. So dominant narratives are narratives about communities that are often based on like a deficit mindset, and counter narratives like basically shows the other side of that narrative and is centered more around like the reality of the experience
And the
or
humanity.
the humanity and uplifting like strengths and a better viewpoint on the community. So they should have read that, and that question kind of ties to them. And we want to wrap up this session with something in Lakesh, which is a poem written by Luis Valdez that was inspired by, I need to read again, but an indigenous group, I think it's Mayan. And we have grounded a lot of our work in this poem. Tú eres mi otro yo, si te hago daño a ti, me hago daño a mí mismo, si te amo y respeto, me amo y respeto yo. So, you know, we've been talking a lot about language basically in this first half of these sessions and a previous workshop they had on identity labels and how they have shaped our understanding of ourselves. So language has been a pretty big topic throughout these few sessions. And I think ultimately we get to this point of acknowledging that the way that we see ourselves is how we see each other. And so if like we love ourselves, we love each other. And yeah.
For the La Cultura Cura, I'm wondering if there is any way, I'll drop this in Slack, but the National Compadres Network has a great one-pager that breaks down their framework around La Cultura Cura. And I think I love the way that y'all are thinking about the sessions and like the big picture connection, right? But I wonder how we, in the framing in the beginning, right? How do we make a connection to why we titled the session La Cultura Cura? And there's, I think, value in even exposing folks to the framework that the National Compadres Network, I don't imagine y'all going deep into it, but
Did you
at least
hear
adding
it?
some context.
Okay.
Yeah, I put it in the.
We've been trying to collect like resources
Yeah.
in the lesson
Love
plans.
that.
I think this is
Oh,
really
perfect.
helpful with transitions and
Mhm.
people understanding.
You don't have to
where
start
it
over.
comes
Yeah.
from and who has
I
shaped
love
it.
that.
And so
You put that
definitely
in
I want to
there.
make sure we include that in the
Yeah.
lesson plan for ourselves.
I
And I
love
haven't
it.
looked too much in the National Compadre Network. I
Mhm.
heard you mention it.
Yeah.
And I think when I went on there, I saw that phrase of La
Mhm.
Cultura Cura.
Mhm.
So definitely want to start like learning more.
Yeah.
So that brings us to lunch. Feel like you're,
Also, like, if there are certain things coming up, questions, curiosities, kind of jump in. Anything coming up for y'all right now? Making personal connections. Yeah. It'll be exciting to see the full picture and then seeing like how, like what's coming up for everyone too. I'm like, well, I created these, but am I like presenting them? I'm like kind of heady in the morning.
yeah, so I think we need to add the like faces to this.
Yeah,
But this is supposed to be you and Brian. Maybe I can do this one with Brian or something, or
Okay.
Kiara, or I could do it by myself.
Yeah, or I could jump in with you in the morning.
could you do, I think maybe
Oh,
you
the role
could,
identity?
yeah,
So, yeah. Okay.
So I'll do,
put Kira there, and then we can chat.
Mhm.
okay.
I have it on my agenda and I still feel, I'm like, wait,
That's a lot.
how am I still like back to back? I told myself there.
I do that to myself.
Okay. For lunch break, there's an activity we started beforehand. We need to put a name on this, but the paper bag.
Yeah, we need something cute.
In the past, we've called this like affirmation something.
Mm-hmm.
We did envelopes.
Mailboxes.
I think the first, yeah, affirmation mailboxes. But everyone has their own little paper bag with their name. We need to make sure y'all create one. And then throughout the day, anyone can like write whatever they want to us, a person. It could be like, oh, like someone shared something really impactful or powerful to you. It could be literally an affirmation to someone saying like, whatever it is, the message you want to share. And so both of these days will continue to do that where they can, drop messages for each other. Let me pull up my lesson plan for this one because it's one of the new ones.
Yeah, so this is a new session.
Okay, so have y'all heard of systems change? Okay, yeah. This will be my first kind of attempt at.
Well, let's go. We're practicing.
Yes. So, systems change is a like framework that is relatively new to us. Kind of like last year we had a session on it and it really helped ground us. And some of the, I think, challenges we were even having or questions on like, how do we approach this work in a way that helps us move the needle forward. And so from there, we were like, oh my God, this is something we need to like talk about more and also share it with our fellows. And so, in our understanding of systems change, a metaphor is frequently used to build an understanding of it. And so it's, you go out to a lake and there's a dead fish, you find this, like, what do you wonder? What would you ask? Like what happened to this fish? Like, did it get bit? Like what happened to it? And that's kind of like where the context starts. And then let's say you come back the next day and then there's like all of these fishes that are dead. Then what questions would you ask then? And you want to get to people thinking like, well, it's not just one fish that got sick. Something's happening in this lake that's causing all of these fishes to be harmed and die. And so who or what does this metaphor represent? The fish represents the people that are part of systems. So the lake is the system. And understanding that oftentimes our work, oftentimes people address the different social issues that are happening by addressing the fish and not addressing the lake. And therefore we continue to serve individuals, but the conditions don't change. And what we really want to think about is how do we create change in the system so that fish don't keep getting hurt, don't keep getting harmed. So really thinking about, and sometimes we think of this like direct service, but also we need both. That's something that's really important to acknowledge, that we need both. We're not just gonna like let the fish die. We need to continue helping the fish. But if we really want to make a permanent change, we need to think about the systems that need to change to not further perpetuate the same cycles. This, I need to look at it more, Lucia, but Lucia shared this. I don't know if it'll be a slide or what it'll be. Maybe talk more about it and then that way it'll help me too.
Yeah, so y'all saw that like the afternoon session is about education and Alamance. So we're kind of talking about the landscape and the outcomes. So we thought it was really important to start with that lens of systems change because oftentimes if you look at the outcomes, right, you have all of these narratives of like, well, parents don't care, they work all the time, kids don't want to learn.
That fish did drugs, that's why it's dead.
That fish drank too much water, like that fish did not, like all the narratives about fish and the fish's family, right? So we wanted to ground in the like fish and the lake metaphor so that when we start to talk about the outcomes later, like we can kind of bring that in, right? So this comes from like the National Equity Project. So part of like the lake, as you said, you did so well, by the way.
Oh my God, I hope I can do this.
No, like really, really good.
Myself.
I think it's a confidence thing, but I think you know what to say. When we're talking about the lake, right, we're talking about conditions. And part of what we need to acknowledge is that the conditions are oppressive. Like we have to say it, we have to talk about it. So this, we don't need to use it necessarily, but I think like the point of this is like talking about like the dimensions of oppression. And like we have to be able to say like the water in the lake is poisonous, like the water is oppressive.
Mhm.
Like that is overwhelmingly those are the conditions of the water. And there are layers to that. Institutions, right? Structures, and then I think we can talk about this super
Actually,
briefly.
you're facilitating this with me, so this is perfect for you.
Okay, great. So yeah, just the levels, right? Institution,
Mhm.
structural, interpersonal, individual. Then we get to ideologies, you know, fat phobia, like colonialism, like that. So it's just like the levels of it. But yeah, the point of this is just being able to acknowledge like the water is poisonous and like we have to approach it as such. And what Mira just said, we talked about this a lot, that like it's really the both and of like we need to save the fish, like fish are suffering. Also, if we're not changing the water, fish are gonna keep dying. So I think when we think about our roles that we talked about in the morning, right? Like we all have our own strengths and our own specialties and our own callings. We all don't need to be doing the same thing. So like if you are working with fish, that is needed, that is powerful, that is important. And we need people that are working on the lake, and like we need the energy in both, and actually we need those to be connected. So just we really just want to hone in on like we need the both, and like fish solutions aren't bad. But I think like I would even want to say in this that like as an organization, Latinx said it is having that transformation of like that shift from like we're still doing some fish solutions, but we really are wanting to think about the lake. Like the fellowship is a fish solution. Like we're working with individuals, but what are those individuals gonna do? They're gonna be a part of cleaning up the lake. So like I think we could even use that metaphor of like how we think of our work. You just added this?
Yeah, I wanted to go back. I love what you were saying, Lucia, as I'm thinking about the setup of the conversation, I agree. You agree that last thing you dropped was so good. I'm getting caught up in the graphic. I think it's
I
a
was
little
thinking
bit
of like,
overwhelming.
maybe if there's a different graphic.
Or just some
something.
other way to.
Okay.
Yeah, cause I think what you were saying, that's it, like, hearing you, I'm clear. Looking at this, I'm like, what the hell is this? Like, I'm getting caught up in
Or
what.
maybe there's like
saying.
version 1, and then to emphasize how complex it is, it's like,
And then you. bring
Okay.
something-
maybe we start with something that like
Mhm.
breaks it down, cause that's why I hadn't even looked at it too much and then I was like, wait, I have not like kind of dissect
Yeah.
the.
Yeah, and I like that I can keep the second one as like, it's complex.
Yes.
But like level 1
Naming
is,
that, yes.
okay,
Mhm.
we can do that.
So this is from the REI training, but a little adapted a little bit for here. So for them to practice kind of identifying fish level solutions versus lake level solutions. Centered around Alamance, because Alamance, this is a pathway. This is a regional pathway, so this is unique to our other pathways that are statewide, which is people across the state, and our youth, which is central to the triangle. In the Alamance pathway, we have professionals who live in Alamance, work in Alamance, or have experience like work being in this area. And so what we want to do is help them identify organizations in Alamance that are working to advance education equity. Some organizations could be like Elon Academy, the Dream Center, which is where we're working at. I guess we're on that list too, potentially.
Yeah.
And then based on like, who are all these people doing this work? We talk about, okay, now make a list of programs these organizations lead. What are those programs and what are they for? And then after that, then we'll say, okay, now let's organize it and say, are these programs or initiatives addressing fish level problems? Or like, are they addressing the fish or are they addressing the lake? We were just part of an REI a training around this, and we did this like with a lot of different contexts, not just education. And then when we organized it, I don't know which ones I did, all of them were fish. And it's like, we aren't going to create change, like permanent change, if we continue to only address the fish, right? And we just want to start challenging ourselves, to think more critically about that and to know like, why are all these fish being sick?
So we talked about this, I think yesterday, of like the way that this activity would go is like they're in groups. And then they're gonna have like those big sticky notes. And so like they write the orgs and the programs in sticky notes, and yeah, kind of like half fish, half
And
lake,
then we'll,
and
like,
then they're
physically
categorizing it.
Put it on the fish
Mhm.
or the. We don't wanna end there. We had a different training, the first training we had, and I bring you back. And is to talk about, okay, like, now that we have an understanding about this, like, this feels like a lot. How
How
am
do
I gonna
we-
clean this lake? Cause
It's dirty.
and we just saw this complex graph, like, I'm feeling a little bit defeated, a little bit like a failure, cause I'm only doing fish level stuff. Like, so what can we share that they can take with them as they try to continue to impact their community and create change? And it's different ways of creating change. And they're all options for how we can address problems,
They're all necessary.
and they're all necessary. So incremental change, reform change, transformation change. Incremental change, kind of like what it says, you're improving performance within existing rules and norms. So you're not really changing the system, but you're helping start making some steps that will, still impact people and still create change. Reform, you're revisiting the structures, rules, and norms so that
Nope.
new types of actions become increasingly prevalent. I think the example I found on this is like recycling. Like, we're still creating trash, but a reform change has been like, how can we do better of how we throw trash and how we repurpose things, right? Like, you are still working within the structure, but you're creating behavioral changes or setting different norms that allow the outcomes to be a little bit different.
Should I pause the recording?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. We recorded the first part for you. You'll have it
This is what that.
later.